cup of coffee, simple, familiar, yet in this moment, it holds the fate of reality itself. As the last drop falls, the boundary between this world and an endless nightmare shatters.
Welcome to the Vault of Tales, a treasure trove of science fiction stories. Today, we follow the journey of a lone barista and a mysterious girl in the last cup of reality. In a forgotten space station, a simple cup of coffee becomes the key to restoring reality, challenging ancient cults, cosmic horrors, and the will of the universe itself. Let's get started. Atlas 12 drifted in the vast, endless dark, a flickering ember in the depths of the galaxy. It wasn't the center of the universe, nor a strategic outpost, just a way station, a brief stop for rusted trade ships, weary travelers, and peculiar beings from every forgotten corner of the cosmos. Here, amidst the hum of reality-bending engines and the occasional flicker of outdated systems, stood something different, a small café, tucked into a quiet alcove of the station. Its weathered metal sign barely legible, Black Nebula. The walls were patched together from salvaged hull fragments, each scarred panel whispering stories of voyages long past, journeys no one remembered anymore. Above, artificial constellations floated lazily, their pale blue light flickering in imitation of a night sky lost to time. The steady hiss of a vintage espresso machine, ancient yet stubbornly functional, drowned out the distant clatter of station life. It was not the most beautiful café in the universe, nor the most luxurious. But it had something. Something that made even creatures without a sense of smell pause at its doorstep. And at the center of it all stood Lucas Varon. Lucas moved behind the counter with effortless precision, hands shifting between packets of freshly ground coffee and steaming kettles. His eyes, a deep and fathomless blue, held the kind of stillness found only in the void between stars, unshaken, unbothered, as if the galaxy itself could crumble around him, and he would simply continue brewing the perfect cup. He spoke little, he didn't need to. In a universe where quantum gods and machine deities waged silent wars for dominance, Lucas was an anomaly. He placed no faith in automated brewers, no trust in precision-calibrated algorithms. To him, coffee was an art, and people, flawed, imperfect, human, were the only true masters of it. Tonight, like every night, he was crafting a stardust espresso, his signature blend, a concoction of almost mythic quality. One sip, and for a fleeting moment, you could taste the universe unraveling on your tongue. The beans came from a forgotten world at the galaxy's edge, the water, siphoned from a comet's frozen heart, and the final ingredient, no one could quite figure that out. Lucas simply smiled to himself as he worked, murmuring under his breath, "Technology can take us to the stars, but only humanity makes them worth reaching." Not everyone agreed. "This one's worse than yesterday." The voice came from the far end of the café, a sharp, clicking rasp. Squid, a small, tentacled alien coiled around an empty metal cup, his stubby appendages twitching in exaggerated disappointment. A regular, he always complained, always found fault, yet never stopped coming back. Lucas barely spared him a glance, nearly shrugged. "If it's so bad, why are you still here?" he thought, but kept silent. Squid muttered something unintelligible, curling up beneath the table as if trying to disappear from the universe itself. Across the room, a pair of luminous eyes watched in quiet fascination. Nia Lyra, a young Ilery girl, small and clumsy, perched at her usual corner seat. Her gaze shimmered, twin stars reflecting the dim glow of the café's artificial constellations. She rarely spoke, but she loved watching Lucas work. The way he poured, the way he stirred, the way he created something she had never seen back on her homeworld. Lucas barely noticed her. He had no idea that, somewhere beyond the café, in the hidden recesses of Atlas 12, a disturbance was stirring, a tear in the fabric of reality itself. A small rift, where light bent in ways it shouldn't. A place station scientists had long dismissed, simply because they could not explain it. Lucas did not know that tonight, something strange was about to happen, and it would all begin with a cup of coffee. Lucas turned his back, wiping down the counter, his blue eyes drifting lazily past the fogged-up window of Black Nebula. He had just finished making a perfect cup of stardust espresso, or at least he thought so. The rich aroma of coffee mingled with the steady hiss of the old machine, filling the small space. He had no idea that, at this very moment, something strange was about to happen. Something that would change everything. Nia Lyra, the Illyri girl with eyes like twin stars, sat quietly at her seat, absent-mindedly fiddling with the small pouch on her hip. She glanced at the cup Lucas had just set down, a dark, glossy liquid, shimmering like a miniature galaxy. Back home, nothing like this existed. No flavor had ever made her feel this peculiar mix of anticipation and curiosity. She stole a quick glance at Lucas, saw that he was preoccupied, and then swiftly slipped her hand into her pouch. A pinch of Illyri crystal salt sparkled between her small fingers, a rare mineral from her distant homeworld. Something she always carried as a keepsake. Just a little, she whispered to herself, just to see if it makes the coffee taste better. She tilted her fingers. The salt fell, dissolving silently into the stardust espresso. And then, it happened. The cup trembled, just the faintest vibration. Barely noticeable, a soft, pale blue glow pulsed across the surface, as if thousands of tiny stars had just woken from slumber. A sharp, crystalline ping rang out, like metal brushing against glass, before vanishing into the air. Nia's eyes widened, her glowing irises reflecting the light. Her fingers trembled. She didn't know what she had done, but she felt it, a strange, invisible force rippling outward from the cup, stretching through the café like silent waves in deep space. Black Nebula shuddered, only slightly, like a whisper of cosmic wind passing through. Spoons on the nearby tables clinked against each other, vibrating as if caught in an unseen dance. But no one seemed to notice. Squid, still curled beneath his table, lifted his head, his stubby tentacles twitching. What the? Is the station malfunctioning again? Lucas turned back, frowning at the cup. Who dumped sugar into my coffee? He muttered, irritation creeping into his voice. He stepped forward, intending to toss the ruined drink away, but then he hesitated. Several corridors away, on the radar screens of Atlas 12's control room, an unexpected signal appeared. A lone asteroid, drifting in a dead sector of space, over 400 light-years away, had just exploded. No warning, no apparent cause, just a silent eruption, leaving behind only a drifting cloud of cosmic dust. Alarms flickered weakly in the distance as station engineers scrambled for answers. But inside Black Nebula, no one knew what had just transpired. Nia looked at Lucas, her heart hammering against her ribs. Fear and exhilaration swirled in her chest. What did I just do? Her glowing eyes darted between the cup and the air around her. Searching for an answer, she had no way of knowing that Illyri crystal salt was more than just a sentimental trinket. It was a remnant of an ancient power, one her ancestors had once wielded to reshape reality itself. And when mixed with Lucas's stardust espresso, it had awakened something far greater than either of them could comprehend. Lucas shrugged, lifting the cup to his nose, inhaling cautiously. Must be my imagination, he muttered, before setting it back down and returning to his work. Far beyond the reaches of Atlas 12, in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, a beacon, long thought dead, flickered to life. A cold, metallic whisper drifted through the void. The universe had just shifted, and it had all begun with a single pinch of salt. In a distant corner of the galaxy, the ancient signal pulsed in the void, whispering cold, metallic echoes that no one could hear. But on Atlas 12 station, life carried on as usual, at least, for the next few minutes. Lucas Varon stood behind the counter of the Black Nebula, absently holding the cup of stardust espresso that had been ruined by what he assumed was sugar. He shrugged, set it down, and turned back to his beloved espresso machine. He had no idea that the universe had just shifted, and that he was standing at the very heart of the coming storm. Outside, space fell eerily silent, The hum of reality shifting drives dimmed, as if the entire galaxy were holding its breath, and then it appeared. A shadow, vast and absolute, swallowed the distant starlight as it emerged near Atlas 12, the mechanical cathedral, the great vessel of the Mechanist Council, manifested like a waking nightmare of steel and circuitry. Its towering, obsidian black hull was inscribed with cryptic, glowing red glyphs. From its flanks, colossal mechanical limbs, each hundreds of meters long, extended outward, curling as if to embrace the station in an unrelenting grip. A low, resonant chime, like the tolling of a long-forgotten bell, reverberated through space, causing the station's metal walls to tremble with each ominous pulse. Inside the black nebula, Nia Lyra stiffened, her luminous eyes whitening. She could feel it, something cold, something ancient, something wrong. Beneath the counter, Squid twitched, his tentacles curling in distress. What was that? Another systems failure? I swear, if I die here. Lucas glanced toward the window, frowning as darkness blanketed the view. Just a big ship, he muttered, trying to sound unimpressed, but he couldn't shake the uneasy thrum in his chest. Then, the voice came. Not through speakers, not through comms. It bypassed all systems, resonating directly in the minds of every living being aboard Atlas 12. A voice deep and mechanical, void of emotion. The ancient signal has been activated. The relic has awakened. Surrender it, or be purged. The Mechanist Council, a fanatical order that believed reality could only remain stable through the divine machinations they worshipped. They were not here for negotiations. They did not come to talk. They had come to take what they desired, by any means necessary. Lucas froze, his fingers tightening around the dishcloth in his hands. His mind raced. I just wanted to make coffee, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. What the hell is a relic? Can someone, anyone, explain what's happening? His gaze darted around the cafe. Nia sat curled in her seat, her hands gripping her satchel like a lifeline. Squid shrieked from under the counter. I told you your coffee was terrible. Now the whole universe wants us dead. Lucas exhaled sharply, shaking his head, trying to ignore the creeping panic clawing at his gut. Outside, the mechanical cathedral advanced, slow but unstoppable, its metallic limbs curled inward. Darkness stretched wider, drowning Atlas 12 in an encroaching tide. Red warning lights flickered across the station. Engineers scrambled, alarms wailing, systems crashing, desperate to understand what was happening. But inside the black nebula, no one knew that all of this had begun with a single pinch of Ilary crystal salt. And now, the Mechanist Council had detected the anomaly. They were here. They wanted the Stardust espresso. Or rather, what had been awakened within it. Lucas stared at the cup on the counter. What the hell is going on? Lucas stood frozen inside the black nebula, his grip still firm around the broomstick, though he knew it was useless. The Mechanist Council's devotees surrounded him, the crimson glow from their armor pulsing like the hungry eyes of something inhuman. Yulzar, the eerie half-machine entity, had just declared him the reality unraveling key, a title that made no sense to him. They wouldn't leave without what they came for, the Stardust espresso, or whatever they believed it represented. Lucas swallowed hard, mumbling under his breath, I just wanted a quiet day to make coffee. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Yulzar drifted closer, its metallic tendrils gliding across the counter, emitting a high-pitched ultrasonic whine. Underneath the table, Squid whimpered, We're dead, we're so dead. The hybrid being halted in front of Lucas, its voice cold and distorted. Brew it again, now, we must verify. Lucas blinked. Brew what? The coffee? Yulzar didn't respond, merely lifted a tendril and pointed at the old espresso machine. The devotees erupted in an eerie, metallic chorus, comply, or be eradicated. Lucas glanced at Nia. The girl sat curled up on her seat, clutching her bag of Ilary crystal salt. He let out a slow breath, setting the broom aside. All right, he muttered, but don't blame me if you don't like the taste. Turning to the machine, his hands moved on instinct, grinding the beans, filling the portafilter, steaming the water, each motion methodical, precise. He was making a simple cup of stardust espresso. And yet, the devotees watched in reverence, their glowing eyes locked onto the brewing process as though he were performing some ancient ritual. Nia bit her lip, watching Lucas work. She knew what had happened last time. Her handful of crystal salt had triggered it. As Lucas turned to check the water temperature, she reached into her bag once more, fingertips trembling. Just a little more, she whispered to herself, her heart pounding. She tilted her hand. A few grains of shimmering salt drifted down. In reality shattered, the espresso trembled violently, a soft blue luminescence rippling across its surface, growing, intensifying, until a brilliant burst of light exploded from the cup. A sharp, ringing chime filled the air, followed by a brittle crack, like glass breaking in the void. Right in the middle of Black Nebula, a fracture in space appeared, thin, jagged, hanging in midair like a tear in the fabric of the cosmos. And through it, a vision of an ancient city, floating in the abyss. Towers of twisted metal stretched toward an unseen sky, pulsating with an eerie glow. It lasted mere seconds before vanishing into darkness. The station itself began to warp. The artificial starlight above twisted, curling like silk caught in an unseen current. The walls wavered, their edges stretching and distorting. A deep, resonant chime echoed from nowhere, low, vibrating, as if calling from another dimension. Squid shrieked, "I don't want to die in a coffee shop." But the Mechanist devotees rejoiced. The formula of reality shaping has been revealed. Yulzar turned to Lucas, lifting its tendrils, its voice laced with something disturbingly close to awe. You are the chosen one." Lucas looked from the fracture in space to the coffee cup, then to Nia. His eyes narrowed. He stepped toward her, voice tight. "What?" he asked. "Did you just do to my coffee?" Nia smiled sheepishly, tucking the bag behind her back. "I might have added a little something." Lucas dragged a hand down his face. "A little something?" He exhaled sharply. "You just tore a hole in the damn universe." Outside, Atlas 12 trembled. Engineers shouted through comms, reporting anomalies, clocks running backward, hallways stretching, space itself bending. But inside Black Nebula, Lucas and Nia faced a far greater revelation. This was no longer just coffee. It was something bigger, something dangerous, and the Mechanist Council would not leave without it. Lucas stood frozen inside the Black Nebula, his grip still firm around the broomstick, though he knew it was useless. The Mechanist Council's devotees surrounded him, the crimson glow from their armor pulsing like the hungry eyes of something inhuman. Yulzar, the eerie half-machine entity, had just declared him the reality unraveling key, a title that made no sense to him. They wouldn't leave without what they came for, the Stardust Espresso, or whatever they believed it represented. Lucas swallowed hard, mumbling under his breath, "I just wanted a quiet day to make coffee." But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Yulzar drifted closer, its metallic tendrils gliding across the counter, emitting a high-pitched ultrasonic whine. Underneath the table, Squid whimpered, "We're dead, we're so dead." The hybrid being halted in front of Lucas, its voice cold and distorted. "Brew it again, now, we must verify." Lucas blinked. "Brew what? The coffee?" Yulzar didn't respond, merely lifted a tendril and pointed at the old espresso machine. The devotees erupted in an eerie, metallic chorus, "Comply, or be eradicated." Lucas glanced at Nia. The girl sat curled up on her seat, clutching her bag of ivory crystal salt. He let out a slow breath, setting the broom aside. All right, he muttered, "but don't blame me if you don't like the taste." Turning to the machine, his hands moved on instinct, grinding the beans, filling the portafilter, steaming the water, each motion methodical, precise. He was making a simple cup of stardust espresso. And yet, the devotees watched in reverence, their glowing eyes locked onto the brewing process as though he were performing some ancient ritual. Nia bit her lip, watching Lucas work. She knew what had happened last time. Her handful of crystal salt had triggered it. As Locust turned to check the water temperature, she reached into her bag once more, fingertips trembling. Just a little more, she whispered to herself, her heart pounding. She tilted her hand. A few grains of shimmering salt drifted down. In reality shattered, the espresso trembled violently, a soft blue luminescence rippling across its surface, growing, intensifying, until a brilliant burst of light exploded from the cup. A sharp, ringing chime filled the air, followed by a brittle crack, like glass breaking in the void. Right in the middle of Black Nebula, a fracture in space appeared, thin, jagged, hanging in midair like a tear in the fabric of the cosmos. And through it, a vision of an ancient city, floating in the abyss. Towers of twisted metal stretched toward an unseen sky, pulsating with an eerie glow. It lasted mere seconds before vanishing into darkness. The station itself began to warp. The artificial starlight above twisted, curling like silk caught in an unseen current. The walls wavered, their edges stretching and distorting. A deep, resonant chime echoed from nowhere, low, vibrating, as if calling from another dimension. Squid shrieked, "I don't want to die in a coffee shop." But the Mechanist devotees rejoiced. The formula of reality shaping has been revealed. Yulzar turned to Lucas, lifting its tendrils, its voice laced with something disturbingly close to awe. You are the chosen one." Lucas looked from the fracture in space to the coffee cup, then to Nia. His eyes narrowed. He stepped toward her, voice tight. "What?" he asked. "Did you just do to my coffee?" Nia smiled sheepishly, tucking the bag behind her back. "I might have added a little something." Lucas dragged a hand down his face. "A little something?" He exhaled sharply. "You just tore a hole in the damn universe." Outside, Atlas 12 trembled. Engineers shouted through comms, reporting anomalies, clocks running backward, hallways stretching, space itself bending. But inside Black Nebula, Lucas and Nia faced a far greater revelation. This was no longer just coffee. It was something bigger, something dangerous, and the Mechanist Council would not leave without it. The Stardust espresso still sat there, shimmering with a faint blue glow on the Black Nebula's counter. But Lucas had no time to question it. Reality around Atlas 12 was distorting, light bending, distant bells tolling, and the followers of the Mechanical Council were closing in. They wanted the formula. They wanted him. They wanted whatever he had accidentally created with Nia's handful of Ilary crystal salt. Lucas stared at the metal-clad zealots, their glowing red eyes locked onto him. And he knew, staying meant the end. "We have to go," he said urgently, grabbing Nia's hand, "right now." Nia hesitated, her luminescent eyes flickering toward the floating rift in the air. "But your shop," she murmured. Lucas cast one last glance at the Black Nebula, the worn metal walls, the artificial starfield on the ceiling, his beloved espresso machine, then clenched his teeth. "They're not getting it," he growled. The metallic footsteps of the zealots grew closer, accompanied by Yulzar's high-pitched, ultrasonic screech. Squid wailed from beneath the counter. "Don't leave me." But Lucas wasn't waiting. He pulled Nia along, shoving through the back door and sprinting down the narrow corridors of the station. The Mechanical Council sealing off the main entrance behind them. They ran through the dimly lit passages of Atlas 12, emergency lights flickering red, alarms wailing in weak protest. Behind them, the clanking of metal on metal grew louder. The zealots were in pursuit. Lucas scanned his surroundings in desperation before spotting an old, rust-covered door with faded lettering, "Quantum Elevator, out of order." "No other choice," he muttered, shoving it open. Inside was a small chamber, its walls etched with deep scratches, a dusty control panel blinking faintly. No one really understood how it worked, an outdated relic from the days when humanity first ventured into the stars. Lucas yanked Nia in, slamming the door shut just as Yulzar's silhouette loomed at the end of the corridor. He slammed his fist onto the activation button, not expecting much, and yet the chamber rumbled. A sharp, piercing hum filled the space, white light flaring as they felt themselves stretched, compressed, and pulled through something beyond physical space. Lucas clutched Nia tightly, whispering, "Just hold on, we'll be okay." He wasn't sure if he believed that. The light faded, the elevator stopped, the doors slid open, not to another hallway of Atlas 12, but to something entirely different. A vast metallic cavern sprawled before them, its walls lined with glowing blue fissures. The air was thick with an eerie hum, and in the center stood a group of strange beings, wanderers of the void. Their bodies a fusion of flesh and machine, their eyes clouded with time. One figure stepped forward, its voice rasping like a whisper from a forgotten past. "You are running from the council too?" Lucas nodded, his grip still firm on Nia's hand. The figure tilted its head, its words weaving a tale from a long-lost era. Thousands of years ago, a race reshaped reality. They bent space, time, everything. Then they vanished. The council calls it a sin. But we call it a miracle. Lucas frowned, glancing at Nia. She lowered her head, her small hands trembling. A chill crept down his spine. Was she connected to this? He knelt down, taking Nia's hands in his voice steady but firm. "No matter what happens, I'll protect you, in my shop." Nia looked up at him, her glowing eyes flickering like stars searching for reassurance in the vast unknown. Beyond the cavern, the distant chimes of the mechanical cathedral still echoed, faint, but unrelenting. They had escaped the shop, but not their fate. Lucas and Nia stood in the cold, metallic cavern, their breaths still ragged from their frantic escape through the quantum elevator. The distant resonance of the Mechanist cathedral echoed through the void, a grim reminder that they had only momentarily slipped from the council's grasp. Lucas tightened his hold on Nia's hand, his voice low but firm. "No matter what happens, I'll protect you and my café." But the moment the words left his lips, a freezing pulse swept through the cavern. The nomadic outcasts surrounding them froze in place, their cloudy eyes whitening with unspoken dread. "It's coming," one of them whispered, their voice quivering. Lucas frowned. "What's coming?" Far above, aboard the Mechanist cathedral, something terrible began to unfold. The metallic disciples knelt in unison, their armor vibrating as if in hymn, a mechanical chant reverberating through the vessel. At the heart of the ship, between towering robotic arms, a shadow formed, not a body, not light, but something beyond matter itself, an immense void bending space around it. The ancient disciple was awakening. Its presence expanded, stretching beyond the ship's hull, reaching across the vacuum, shrouding Atlas 12 in a deathly veil. Then came the sound, a deep, metallic growl, not of rage, not of life, but of something ancient, something unshackled from time itself. Back at the Black Nebula, though Lucas and Nia were gone, the café felt the presence. The battered metal walls, scraps from old starships, began to tremble, vibrating under an unseen force. Then, one by one, they lifted, as if drawn toward the distant abyss. The espresso machine hissed violently, its pipes rattling. The lone Stardust espresso, still resting on the counter, pulsed with a faint blue glow, brighter, stronger, almost alive. Underneath the table, Squid shrieked, "I knew it, that cursed coffee of yours is doomed." But no one was there to listen. Only the disciples remained, chanting in reverent ecstasy. Aboard the Mechanist cathedral, the void twisted and shifted, never settling on a fixed shape. It was nothingness incarnate, save for two cold, distant lights, like the hollow eyes of a forgotten god. And then, a voice, not spoken through air, but carried directly into the minds of every being on Atlas 12. "A barista, a cup of coffee, a new reality shall rise." It was neither a prophecy nor a command. It was simply truth. The council's disciples knelt lower, their voices rising in fevered unison. The reality unmaker has arrived. To them, Lucas, just a man with coffee-stained hands, was the chosen one, the harbinger of a rewritten universe. But deep within the cavern, Nia felt something else. The moment the voice echoed, she clutched her head, her luminous eyes flickering wildly. Visions rushed through her mind, fractured glimpses of cracked space, ancient cities floating in the void, and figures like herself, with eyes like distant stars, holding small crystalline shards. Ancestors, she whispered, her voice trembling. She didn't understand, not fully, but she felt it. A buried memory stirring within her very blood. Lucas turned, catching her sudden unease. "What's happening to you?" he asked, concern edging his voice. Nia lifted her gaze, her irises shimmering like nebulae. "I see them," she murmured. "Those who did this before, the salt, the reality." Lucas tensed. He didn't understand, not yet, but one thing was clear. Nia was no ordinary girl. She was the key to whatever the Council was hunting. Beyond the cavern walls, the void of the ancient disciple stretched further, its deep metallic growl shaking the very foundations of Atlas 12. Engineers across the station screamed as instruments failed, as reality itself wavered and buckled. But in the cavern's quiet depths, Lucas only tightened his grip on Nia's hand. "I don't care what you are," he said, voice steady. "I won't let them take you." Something ancient had awakened, and it wanted coffee, or the power hidden within it. The metallic cavern trembled under the influence of the Mechanist cathedral, its walls vibrating as the deep, mechanical roar of the ancient disciple echoed through unseen fractures. Lucas tightened his grip on Nia's hand, his voice steady but laced with an unspoken fear. "Whatever you are, I won't let them take you." But as he looked into her star-lit eyes, doubt flickered behind his determination. Nia wasn't just a child who had accidentally dropped some salt into his coffee. She was something more, something the entire universe seemed to be hunting. And as she whispered about her ancestors, a question settled deep in Lucas's chest, heavy and undeniable. Was she the key to ending all of this? Then, reality twisted. A sharp crack split the air. Before them, space itself fractured, forming a shimmering rift, thin, elongated, glimmering like the jagged edge of a broken mirror. But this was no mere reflection. It was a window, a portal into the past. Lucas and Nia stood frozen, watching as the rift revealed a breathtaking sight, beings like Nia. Their eyes aglow with celestial light, standing among the stars. In their hands, they held crystalline fragments of ivory salt, pulsating with an ethereal blue glow. Around them, the fabric of existence warped, space bent, time coiled, entire planets reshaped themselves at their will. These were Nia's ancestors, the reality shapers, masters who had once sculpted the universe itself. But then, the vision shifted. A war erupted, not one fought with starships or weapons, but with fractures in reality and colossal machines. Not unlike the Mechanist cathedral, a metallic roar shook the cosmos as the Illyri fell, one by one, consumed by the very forces they sought to control. And when the last of them faded into the void, all that remained was darkness, and the crystalline remnants of their power. The rift collapsed in on itself, sealing the vision away. Silence settled over the cavern once more. Lucas turned to Nia, his ocean blue eyes filled with something between awe and dread. "You," his voice barely found its way out. "You're one of them, aren't you?" Nia looked down, fingers clenching the small pouch of salt she carried. She didn't answer at first, but her glowing eyes flickered, memories stirring, awakening. Then, in a hushed whisper, she said, "I don't know, but when I put the salt in your coffee, I felt it, a power, like theirs." The realization struck Lucas like a thunderbolt. It wasn't him, it wasn't the Stardust espresso. It was Nia. She was the last of the Illyri, and her dormant abilities had been triggered when the salt fused with his coffee. That drink wasn't the artifact the Council sought, it was merely the catalyst. They had been chasing the wrong thing. They thought Lucas was the chosen one, but it had always been Nia. Lucas knelt before her, his hands firm on her shoulders. His voice was low, heavy with meaning. "If I turn you in, all of this ends. But I can't do that. Can I?" He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a warrior. Just a barista with nothing but his instincts and a deep, unwavering belief in human decency. But looking into Nia's eyes, eyes that held the echoes of a lost civilization. He knew one thing. He couldn't let them take her. Nia looked up, her small hands wrapping around his. Her glowing eyes no longer wavered, not in fear, but in quiet resolve. "We'll find another way," she said softly. Her voice was small, but sure. Lucas exhaled in, for the first time that day, allowed himself a smile, small, tired, but undeniably human. Around them, the scavengers who had been lurking in the cavern watched in silent reverence. Outside, the mechanical hum of the Mechanist cathedral grew louder. The council was closing in. But at that moment, Lucas and Nia stood together, not as fugitives, but as two souls ready to face whatever fate awaited them. The metallic cavern trembled under the approaching presence of the mech sanctum. The rhythmic hum of its vast machinery grew louder, reverberating through the walls like an impending judgment. Lucas and Nia stood firm, their hands clasped together, their eyes unwavering. They had made their choice, not to flee, but to carve out their own destiny. But before they could act, a pulse of white light erupted from the quantum elevator. Space twisted, time bent, and in an instant, they were no longer in the cavern. When their vision cleared, they found themselves back inside the black nebula. The café was no longer the safe haven it had once been. The metal walls bore the scars of conflict. The artificial star field above flickered weakly, and the air was thick with the tension of an inevitable confrontation. Encircling them were the devout followers of the council, their glowing red eyes locked onto them with mechanical precision. A figure emerged from the crowd, Yolzar, half machine, half something else, his segmented tendrils slicing through the air with calculated menace. His voice, a razor-edged growl, echoed through the ruined café. "You cannot run." His metallic resonance carried an unnatural weight. "The relic belongs to us. Surrender it, or this reality will be rewritten." Lucas's gaze flicked toward the counter. There, untouched amidst the chaos, sat the Stardust espresso, its surface shimmering faintly with the soft glow of Ilery crystal salt. But he knew the truth. The council didn't want the coffee. They wanted Nia. Lucas stepped forward, positioning himself between Nia and the encroaching zealots. His voice was calm, but edged with defiance. "If you truly believe my coffee is a relic," he said, "then let me make one last cup." The followers hesitated. Even Yolzar's glowing sensors flickered as he analyzed the proposal. No machines, no formulas. Lucas's eyes locked onto Yolzar's. "Just instinct. If I succeed, you leave. If I fail," he exhaled slowly, "reality is yours to reshape." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, Yolzar tilted his head, his mechanical appendages twitching in consideration. "A foolish wager," he intoned, "but one we accept. Fail, and you will witness the unraveling of existence." The council's followers responded with a unified, metallic roar, a sound that rattled the walls, vibrating deep into Lucas's bones. A small hand tightened around his. "Are you sure?" Nia whispered. Lucas turned to her for the first time in hours, allowed himself a slight smile. "No," he admitted, "but certainty is overrated." Lucas stepped behind the counter, his fingers brushing against the worn leather of his coffee pouch. His beloved espresso machine was little more than a smoldering wreck, its once polished frame reduced to blackened metal. But he didn't need it. Closing his eyes, he took a deep breath. A memory surfaced, his mother's hands, brewing coffee in their tiny earthside kitchen, sunlight spilling through the window, the scent of freshly ground beans filling the air. No technology, no calculations, just patience, skill, and heart. Humanity doesn't need machines to create miracles, he murmured, half to himself, half to the universe. And then, he began. Without grinders, he crushed the beans using a jagged shard of metal salvaged from the wreckage. Without precision heating systems, he grabbed a dented kettle, filled it with cold water, and, lacking better options, struck two pieces of broken machinery together, igniting a shower of sparks. It was primitive, desperate, reckless, but he didn't stop. The followers of the council watched in absolute silence, their crimson eyes reflecting the flickering flames. Nia stood beside him, clutching the small pouch of Ilery salt, her own gaze glowing with an unreadable emotion. From beneath the table, Squid, his panicked, tentacled companion, poked his head out. "Lucas, you're insane," he wailed. In his frantic scuttling, the little creature collided with a council device, a signal emitter, knocking over a bottle of water onto its circuits. A sharp beast erupted as sparks flew, and smoke curled into the air. Yolzar whipped around, his tendrils twitching in agitation. "You incompetent fool," he snarled. Squid shrank back. "I didn't mean to." Lucas let out a quiet chuckle, a moment of absurdity amidst the brink of cosmic annihilation. He kept going, each movement measured, deliberate, guided not by technology, but by something deeper. The beans, the water, the slow, patient extraction. No machines, no formulas, just a man, a barista, standing against the divine machinery of an all-powerful council. The scent of coffee filled the ruined café, rich, earthy, alive. Yolzar's sensors pulsed. "Is it finished?" Lucas lifted the hand-brewed cup, its surface shimmering with a faint, almost ethereal glow. He turned to Nia. "Almost," he said softly. "The final touch is yours." The gamble with the universe had begun. Lucas stood in the heart of Black Nebula, holding a crude, makeshift cup of coffee. No machines, no formulas, just the raw intuition of a human. His gaze met Nia's, her deep blue eyes shimmering with trust. Nia nodded, her glowing eyes reflecting the starlight overhead. In her hand, she clutched the small pouch of Ilery crystal salt. This was it, the wager against the universe. And now, they would prove it, not with machines, not with gods, but with a simple cup of coffee and a girl who defied fate. He handed her the cup. The council's zealots stood still, their crimson-lit visors flickering like dying stars. At the center of them all, Yolzar watched, unblinking. Squid, still cowering beneath the table, whispered, "We're doomed." Lucas didn't care. This wasn't about relics, it wasn't about ancient power. It was about creation, about something only human hands, guided by heart and memory, could make. Nia inhaled deeply, then raised the cup to her lips and took the first sip. For a moment, silence. Then, the cup ignited. A wave of pale blue light burst outward, bright as a newborn star, accompanied by a high-pitched hum, like a jump drive spinning up in a maelstrom. The radiance spread, pushing against the metal walls, washing over the zealots, making the entire station tremble. Nia stood firm, her eyes burned even brighter, as though the ancient power of the Ilery had fully awakened within her. Lucas took a step back, breathless. "It's working." But then, the shadow came. From the depths of the machine cathedral, the ancient disciple surged forth, not as flesh, but as an all-consuming darkness, bending reality itself around its form. Its metallic howl thundered across Atlas 12. No, it roared, its voice rippling through the void. "Reality belongs to me." The darkness lashed out, twisting through the station, coiling around the light from the cup, trying to smother it. The zealots cheered, chanting in unison, "The disciple will reign." Lucas moved before thinking. He tore the cup from Nia's hands, the glow still pulsing within. "If I'm right," he muttered, "this is all we need." Then, he ran, straight toward the rift in space, the remnant of that first impossible brew. The ancient disciple shrieked, its shadows lunging to consume him. But Lucas was faster. With every ounce of strength left in him, he hurled the cup into the tear. "Drink this." The cup shattered mid-air, and the universe detonated. A flash of pure white light swallowed everything. Not a destruction, but a reset. A cleansing wave rippled outward, unraveling the disciples' darkness, drowning out the crimson glow of the zealots, silencing the trembling echoes of the machine cathedral. Space twisted, reformed, and then settled. Black Nebula's walls stopped shaking. The artificial stars overhead steadied, burning strong once more. Outside, the machine cathedral collapsed, its massive metal pillars shattering and drifting into the abyss. The ancient disciple screamed one last time, then faded into nothing. And silence returned. Lucas gasped for breath, turning to Nia. She smiled, her eyes now soft, glowing like the last embers of a fire. He let out a breathless chuckle and collapsed onto the floor, exhaustion catching up to him. Next time, he croaked, "Don't add the salt." Nia laughed, nodding. "I promise." Squid peeked out from under the table, waving a tentacle wildly. "We're alive, but Lucas, your coffee still sucks." Lucas shot him a glare, but for once, he didn't argue. Atlas 12 had stabilized. The engineers stopped panicking. The lights no longer flickered. Black Nebula remained standing, scarred, but unbroken. Lucas looked around, feeling the weight of what they had just done. Not with technology, not with gods, but with their own hands. Humanity had won. Then, the cafe door creaked open. A new customer stepped inside, a tall, slender figure draped in a gray cloak. Their voice was smooth, calm. "I'll have a Stardust espresso." Lucas nodded and turned to prepare the order. As he did, the stranger discreetly dropped something into their cup, a tiny, glimmering crystal, pulsating with violet light. Far beyond the cafe, in the wreckage of the machine cathedral, a small, blinking signal pulsed in the darkness. Weak, but not dead. The story wasn't over.